I may have licked the inside of the little bowl.
All right, so thank you guys for being here. I do appreciate it. I made some notes for you this time because there's going to be some reading because we're going to go over some case studies. So here was my mindset behind this. We're talking about the power of your mind. So that in itself, that title is very untangible, right? And so a lot of people probably looked at just that title and said, I don't want anything to do with that stuff, right? So basically, this entire presentation is science and case studies and proof behind how powerful your mind is in creating your life. All right? So the first thing that we start with, and by the way, I ask a lot of questions because I didn't want to just give you all the answers. I don't have any of the answers, right? We just have the facts, and then that poses even more questions. And then we, as a personal, a personal task, I have to answer each one of these questions for myself, just like you have to answer each one of these questions for yourself. So, could the key to achieving everything you want in life start with your mind? Well, I want to start with a quote here that I really like. Your beliefs become your thoughts, okay? Your thoughts become your words become your actions then become habits, your habits become your values, and those values become your destiny. So they shape your future, and they all start with beliefs or thoughts. So another question you have to ask yourself is, what does success mean to you? Because that's really what we're talking about. That's really what we all want out of life. But success for me is going to be a little bit different than success is for you. And for me, success is that feeling of joy, contentment, and fulfillment. If I can achieve that in my life, I feel successful. At least on the inside, I feel successful. And to me, there's also outer success that I want to achieve as well. And that really is the feeling of not only that I've achieved something, but I've been productive. You know, I'm the kind of person that I can't stay in on the weekends. You know, even when it's pajama day, what my writer calls it, my 5-year-old, it's like, I've got to do something. Come on, let's go to Walmart and walk around. You know, something to get out, to feel productive, to feel like I've done something. Go outside into the garden. But that helps me to achieve outer success, and there's nothing like that feeling of helping somebody else. Or even this presentation actually helps me to feel like I'm helping somebody else, or I'm giving to a community, right? And so that's important for each one of us to do those types of things to achieve that success. Now, I have a couple of scripture and a couple of, you'll notice, older quotes, because the stuff that we talk about here really isn't new. It's been around for ages, and they had it right back then. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." And I'll add for you, right? All right, so have you ever heard of a placebo effect? Anybody? All right, so good. So the placebo effect is basically where someone can take a sugar pill or even a saline solution. Sometimes they'll inject saline solution. And based on that person's expectations, something actually manifests, something actually happens, even though they weren't giving what they thought they were given. So why is this? Well, WebMD says one of the most common theories is that the placebo effect is due to a person's, and we're going to talk about this is important, expectations. If a person expects a pill to do something, then it's possible that that body's own chemistry will cause the effect similar to what a medication might have caused. Okay? So if expectations are so important, then I also think it's important that we define expectation. It's a strong belief, there we have that word again, that something will happen or be the case in the future. A belief that someone will or should achieve something. And that's straight from Wikipedia. Now, the reading that I would recommend is this book, so it's actually really good. It talks about You Are the Placebo, and it is where some of the published articles that I got on here came out of. But I highly recommend it. So let's go through some of the cases, all right? So you have these here, and to remind myself, I'm going to go through some of these here with you. All right, so this was Sam Lundy. Now, this was in 1970, but it's documented, published study. Sam Lundy began having difficulty swallowing, and he was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, so cancer of the esophagus. And at this time, no one had ever survived from esophageal cancer. They said there was no cure, but the doctor recommended that he have surgery and that they try to remove it, and they did. But his condition went, what they say, quote unquote, bad to worse, okay? Then they did a scan where they found that metastatic cancer had actually spread to his liver, and so he was in really bad shape. And according to the article, his family, they found a cancer doctor in Nashville. They wanted to move closer to family there. And that's the doctor who actually documented everything, Dr. Clifton Meter. So Dr. Meter asked Lundy when he got there, he said, "What do you want from me? What do you want? How can I help you achieve a goal?" And Dr. Lundy said, or Sam Lundy said, "I really want to live until Christmas. That's my goal. I want to live until Christmas." And it was a few months away. Now, they note that he improved significantly after that. He got better really fast. He actually got to go home. And he went through Christmas. And exactly 1 week after Christmas, Lundy was readmitted and he was deathly ill. Even though he had done so well those months, 1 week after Christmas he was readmitted. And then Dr. Meter did the tests on him and they couldn't find anything. They couldn't find any cancer. The surgery had taken the cancer out of the esophagus, and they couldn't actually find cancer in his liver. They noted in the notes that they had found one spot of pneumonia, a small spot in his lungs, but they said that wouldn't really cause death, and they gave him antibiotics. But nevertheless, the patient was dead the next day. All right. So the autopsy revealed, they did an autopsy, no cancer. They even found out that the liver test that they had done previously was a false positive. So he actually didn't have any cancer at all, but he was set on living until after Christmas, and then he knew that was when he was going to die. Okay? So this was a quote by Dr. Meter. He says, "Lundy's doctor in St. Louis thought he was going to die. I thought he was going to die. His wife and family thought he was dying too. And most importantly, Sam Lundy himself thought he was dying." So this brings up a couple questions. Is it possible that Sam Lundy died from thought alone, that he created that? And so if that's possible and thought is that powerful, is there any other cases, or is that a unique case? So we're going to go through a few more. The question on this next case is, can you overdose on a placebo? All right, so this was a case where a 26-year-old graduate student, he had just broken up with his girlfriend, and he saw an ad for clinical trials for an antidepressant medication. Now, in his history, he had previous, one previous time he was diagnosed with antidepressants. He went through a small bout of depression, I believe it was after high school, but the medication that they gave him had so many bad side effects. He was drowsy, he couldn't get out of bed, so they had to take him off of those antidepressants. But at this point, he decided to volunteer for this study. This was on his campus. And so, okay, so he goes approximately 1 month into the study, and he had a argument with that same girlfriend. So what he decides to do is he grabbed his bottle of pills and he swallowed, what they counted 29 pills that were left in that container in an attempt to kill himself, okay? So they said immediately he had repented. He decided he did something crazy. He didn't want to die. He runs out into his apartment hallway screaming, "Help me, help me." He had a neighbor who heard the screams and came to help. And at this point, this kid was writhing on the floor, told his neighbor what he did, but screamed he didn't want to die. So his neighbor, of course, took him to the hospital. Now, documented at the hospital, his documented blood pressure was 80/40. He had a 140 pulse rate, and he kept repeating with a slur. So he was like coming in and out of consciousness with a slur, "I don't want to die." All right. Now, they did all the tests on this individual, and they couldn't find anything in his blood. So they kept asking him, "What kind of drug did you take? What kind of drug did you take?" And all he could tell them was he didn't remember the name, but that he was a part of a trial, a drug trial. So this went on for 4 hours of him coming in and out of consciousness, and this, with his pulse rate extremely low, dangerously low, until they found one of the doctors who was part of that study. That doctor came to the hospital and checked the code on the pill bottle, right? Which, guess what it was? It was a placebo. Now, according to this gentleman, this student, found out that he had taken the placebo, and within minutes, blood pressure was back to normal, pulse rate was normal. He walks out of the hospital with no symptoms at all. All right? Yeah, exactly. So his thoughts literally dropped his blood pressure to 80/40, his pulse up, and kept going out of consciousness, just 100% because of his mind, right? So if it's really possible that his symptoms have been brought on solely because of what he expected to happen from swallowing that handful of antidepressants, then what really happened, and what do we have to look at? So this expectation is extremely powerful, right? This guy's body, his mind took those thoughts and took control over systems in his body that it doesn't normally have control over, and forced that to happen. So if that's true, and could it also be true that if our thoughts can make us sick, then could our thoughts make us healthy, right? That's an important question. Well, let's look at another case. And we should probably change here too, just to go along here, all right? So this is a little bit older, but 1957, you know what? I'm going to go off of this. All right. The UCLA psychologist Bruno Klopfer, however you say that, published and this was, again, published in a peer-reviewed article, so all these things are documented cases. So there was a middle-aged man who was diagnosed with lymphoma. That was cancer of the lymph glands. They said he had huge tumors in his neck, his groin, and his armpits, the size of oranges, okay? So now he wasn't just sick, he was on his deathbed. In fact, quote-unquote, febrile, gasping for air, completely bedridden. The doctors had given up, but the individual had actually heard that there was a drug trial going on in the hospital, a cancer drug that could cure cancer. All right. Now he begged to be a part of this study, and interesting thing is he actually was not eligible for the study at first because they said you had to have a life expectancy of over 3 months to be in the study, but he begged and begged his doctor to change his life expectancy to allow him to get into the study, which his doctor did, and allowed him to go into the study. Now this is what it says. The subject received the injection on that Friday. By Monday, he was up, walking around, laughing, joking, feeling like a new man. All right. The doctors reported that the tumors that were orange-sized tumors, they melted like snowballs on a hot stove. So the actual tumors that was in his neck, groin, and armpit completely went away and reversed. So for 2 months, this guy goes home and is perfectly fine. But they find out 2 months later, the media reports that this drug he was taking, krebbiosine, that was the trial that they were on. They said the media reported that it was a dud, and he found out about that. And they said immediately he started developing tumors again. And so tumors came back. He was back in through the hospital. And his doctor was smart enough. He suspected a placebo effect, right? So in conjunction with his own family, is the way I understand it, with his wife, they wanted to tell the subject that what had happened was that the media was wrong, and that he had just gotten a bad batch of krebbiosine. They had given him, some more shots of that, and that was the reason why he relapsed. And then I thought this was interesting, like very believable, right? They told the subject that there was a new, super refined, double-strength version of the drug that was on its way to the hospital, and he could have it as soon as it arrived. Now listen to this. 2 days later, he received a shot, but no drug, not even the krebbiosine. They actually put distilled water. They gave him a shot of distilled water, and guess what happened? Tumors went away, went completely into remission again, and he was perfectly fine for 2 more months, but you know what happened? And this is actually a pretty big deal. You could look it up. The American Medical Association, they made an announcement that this krebbiosine, it was actually a dud. It was not just a dud, it was actually a hoax drug. Like they didn't even have a drug. The people who created it were indicted. They went to prison. That they were just injecting people with an amino acid, basically. And it wasn't even a drug. So this guy finds out about it, and upon hearing the news, the subject relapsed again, thinking, no, this is quote-unquote, no longer believing in the possibility of health. He returns to the hospital and dies 2 days later. Is that crazy? So, another study, 1996, orthopedic surgeon. Now, this is right here in Houston. So, an orthopedic surgeon, he's from Baylor College of Medicine. He's one of Houston's leading experts in orthopedic sports medicine. And he was doing a study on arthroscopy. So, there was... basically, what they do is they make a small incision, and then they go in there with an arthroscope to look around inside the joint. And then if there's debris, they scrape the debris out, and they basically just clean out that joint. So he wanted to do a study with 10 cases, and these all had different knee problems and severity, but all of them either had limps, canes, or they needed some type of assistance to get around. All right? So they split these up, the 10 people, they split them up like this. 2 would receive the standard debridement. That's where they go in and they do scrape out the joint. All right, 3 of them would receive a lavage. That's where they go in there, instead of scraping it, they'd use high pressure wash and they wash out the joint. And then 5 of them would actually receive what they call a sham surgery. So they would go and they would put them under, then they would make the same incision they would for an arthroscope, right? But they would just sew it back up and give them stitches, okay? And none of these individuals knew which procedure they had had, okay? All right, now after the surgeries, all 10 men reported improvement, less pain, and more mobility. The men who received the sham surgery did just as well as those who had received the debridement and the lavage, and there was no difference in results. Even 6 months follow-up, there was no difference in results. All right? So this fascinated Dr. Moseley, and he said, let's do this again, but with more people, okay, for a longer period of time. So he got 180, found 180 patients with knee problems. They did the same thing where they split them up into 3 different groups. And this was in 2002, so this wasn't even that long ago. And they followed them, instead of 6 months, they followed them for 2 years. All right? Same thing. All 3 groups improved. The patients beginning to walk without pain, limping immediately after the surgery, and all 3 groups improved the same even after 2 years of follow-up. Right? Pretty amazing. So could it be that these patients got better simply because they had faith and they believed in maybe the power of the surgeon, or this surgery, or this fact that they were just having surgery, that something was happening? And then what happened? Well, did they envision a life with a healthy knee? So they expected a healthy knee. They kept seeing that in their mind. And then they surrendered to that possible outcome, so their minds began to create that. All right? And this is not something that's, out there in the clouds. This actually happened. In the late 1950s, there were 2 groups of researchers comparing, which was then a standard surgery for angina. Does anybody know what angina is? It is a chest pain that that guys will have a lot of times, and I'm not sure, maybe girls can have. It's primarily in men, but they think they're having a heart attack. So it's chest pain can even go down into the arm, and it mimics a heart attack, but it's just there's a lack of blood flow and oxygen to certain areas around the heart, so it causes that pain. So what they normally did back then, and they might do something different now, but they did it what was called an internal mammillary ligation. So what they did was they exposed the arteries and they tie off some of those damaged arteries so that the body will begin to grow axillary arteries around that, right? So it begins to grow new, healthy arteries. So they had already done these surgeries, and they were quote-unquote successful, but they had no proof. And so they had to do this study, so they compared them to a sham surgery, where they would go in and during the sham surgery, they would do the incision, expose the arteries, but then they would just sew that back up. They wouldn't tie any arteries off. Now watch this. The results. Okay, 67% of the patients who received the real surgery reported less pain and needed less medication. 83% of the patients who received the sham surgery reported the same level of improvement. All right, so could it be that somehow the patients who had received the sham surgery so believed that they'd get better that they actually did? And if the answer to that is yes, so what does this say about the effects of our everyday thoughts, our attitude overall, whether you have positive thoughts or you have negative thoughts? And we have to start thinking, the way we are right now, this reality, this personality, is it actually shaping and creating the life that we actually have now? Okay? So the answer to that, I took some very quick studies to show you, but when we're just looking at thoughts and how that affects your overall life, watch this. The Mayo Clinic published a study in 2002. They followed 447 people for more than 30 years, and they showed that optimists were healthier physically and mentally than pessimists. The researchers at Yale, they followed 660 people aged 50 and older for up to 23 years. So these are long studies. And they showed that people who had a positive attitude about aging lived 7 years longer than people who had a negative outlook towards aging. Okay? Duke University, now this was interesting, look at this, 886 patients, and basically they reported that 20%, okay, so of those who said they routinely felt more positive, they had a 20% greater chance of just being alive 11 years later. right? How crazy is that? You have a 20% greater chance of being alive 11 years from now if you have a positive outlook on life. The results of a study, 255 medical students, so these were actually students that were still in school at the Medical College of Georgia, and they were followed for 25 years, and they say that those who were most hostile, had the most hostile life, they were 5 times greater incidence of coronary heart disease, okay? And then this one was cool too, that John Hopkins study, and they presented at the American Heart Association, but basically they showed that a positive outlook may offer the strongest known protection against disease in adults, heart disease in adults, at risk due to family history. So even if you have a genetic predisposition for heart disease, the greatest defense against that is a positive outlook on life, okay? So it's easy to see with those studies that, yes, our thoughts definitely affect our health and also our life. But is it possible for us to change our mindset? So we are this person based on our experiences, based on these things. So if we are a negative person, is it possible for us to change that mindset into a positive? And if we could change, could we literally shape our experiences and build that life of our dreams, that life that we want to live? All right, so I want to tell you that, you know, we talked about the placebo. And when we say the placebo, it sounds like it's something outside of us, right? But this is why this book is called You Are the Placebo. Because this is you. This is that person who actually healed themselves. And so if Joe Dispenza in that book, he says your personality creates your personal reality. And our personality is made up of how we think, act, and feel. Okay, so if we want to start changing and molding our future, those are the 3 things that we have to look at. How we're thinking, how we're acting, and how we're feeling, and we need to start changing that. We need to decide what reality we want, and then we need to start thinking, acting, and feeling in congruence with that reality, and that will actually create it for us. All right? So here's one thing that we always say, that there's a river of change. So basically, what keeps people from changing so many times is this feeling of different is uncomfortable, right? So we become who we are because we are in this rut, because we are who we are, and we don't want to change because that feels uncomfortable. So the one thing to do is to actually start to embrace change. Joseph Campbell in The Hero's Journey, he says, we need to be willing to leave the comfort of the known and venture into the forest of the unknown. That is what actually makes change, and that's what actually causes us to change our future and even change our reality even for today. And so I want to introduce something called epigenetics, because I see this, especially in my clinics, that people are so tied with, this genetic, like I'm just slave to my genetics, right? I was born with this cancer gene. I was born with this, back pain gene. I was born with whatever it was. The problem with thinking that way is that we never do what it takes to change that, because we feel like we're slave to that. We can't change that. All right, so until very recently, scientists believed that our genetic code was fixed, but we now know that even though our genetic code never changes, our behaviors and our environment can determine the sequence of this code that's in there. That's what epigenetic is. Epigenetic literally means above the genes. So let me give you a great example of epigenetics. All right, so imagine twins that are completely genetically identical. So identical twins. They literally, if you took the genome out, they would look exactly the same, okay? So if our genetic code predetermined our outcome, that means when those twins were 90 years old, they should both look exactly the same, and they should both have the same diseases, right? Science finds that is absolutely not the case. So why? Why would that not be the case? Because these two genetically identical twins made different lifestyle choices, all right? So they made small epigenetic tweaks. Those choices that they make throughout life began to have completely different paths and completely different outcomes. So that shows us that based on your choices, based on your mind, based on those types of things, we can actually change even our genetics to shape into our reality, all right? So we have to become epigenetic engineers. And the way we do this has been shown. So this is the key to this entire presentation, is how you could actually do this in your life. It's called mental rehearsal. All right? So this technique, you close your eyes and you repeatedly imagine performing an action or mentally viewing this future that you want to create. And so, and you at the same time, you want to remind yourself who you no longer are, right? So if I had cancer, I would imagine myself no longer having it, and I would create that future of me being totally well. Okay? So science has actually done this in using sports. So they took basketball players that shoot free throws, right? And they would have one person imagine or go through the motions of shooting 1,000 free throws. And then the other person actually shoot the 1,000 free throws. And they would actually both improve in the same amount. So your mind doesn't know whether you're going through that inside your mind or you're actually doing it. You would actually, you change your brain. And they've done PET scans, there's images of them all through these books. But when you imagine this, you actually connect and make neurology in your brain through these pathways, just like you were actually shooting the basketball. All right? So this is what we call mental rehearsal. And this is science. So research has showed us that when you practice this technique, you actually reshape the neural networks in your brain and begin to create new thoughts, which we learned leads to new realities, and mindsets, which eventually lead to new actions, then new realities. So imagine your ideal future with strong emotions such as joy and gratitude, and that was the key. When you're going through this, you don't just go through the motions, or you don't just imagine these things. You have to be able to imagine it with strong emotion, because that's what actually grows the neural networks into the brain, is those strong emotions. And the strongest emotion that you can have is gratitude. All right? So gratitude is powerful, and this is what that you want to use during these mental rehearsals. So, because gratitude, okay, listen to this, gratitude teaches your body emotionally that the event you're grateful for has already happened. Because most of the time, when we're grateful for something or we give thanks for something, that event has already occurred, right? Now, I thought this was interesting. We take for another scripture here, Mark 11:24. This is why they say, therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it already, and it will be yours. Right? So these are the universal laws and the mind, the things that they were creating way back then, just by already believing that we are there. We're grateful for what we already have, and then the universe puts things in motion that brings it about. Right? We actually change our reality by changing our thoughts. Bottom line, guys, what I hope you receive from this training is that your mind is much more powerful than you actually think. If that's all we got, and that's all we believed, was just that where I am right now, I'm not using 100% of this power that's in my mind, right? And if I just focused on using a little bit more. And I want to share something weird with you that actually happened to me, because I started studying this stuff, right? And I thought, well, I have to actually implement it before I do this presentation. This was actually, it was like 2 nights ago. I started getting these symptoms of a cold. Man, you can feel that, right? When it starts coming on, and you feel your throat start to hurt, and you get congested, right? So what I did was I started doing this mental rehearsal while laying on my spinal molding rolls, which is something I definitely recommend. And so I would lay there, and I would just imagine I'm strong, I'm healthy, I have no cold. I'm strong, I'm healthy, I have no cold. And where I was is gone, this cold is gone, but my body's doing exactly what it needs to do to knock this thing out from the inside. And I just started imagining that. Do I have a cold right now? Isn't that crazy? Believe it if you want to, but for me, that was actual implementation of doing some of this. And so far, I really believe it works. If we learn to really harness our mind, then we could create the life that we desire. And so I always want to tie it into this and imagine, okay, so here's the reason why I believe. You've seen dogs come in here every once in a while. Like, people will actually bring their dog. I have this crazy story with dogs. They get better like amazingly fast. It's weird. I had a lady who brought her corgi in, those long furry dogs. She asked me if I could adjust it, and I was like, this was like before I even let dogs come in the office. I was like, I guess so. And she said, well, it's been at the vet for 2 weeks. They want to send him home. They said I could put him down, but I don't want to do that. They're just going to send him home and let him die at home. And I said, well, what am I going to do? And they said, well, can you just adjust it? Just maybe it'll be a little bit more comfortable, right, as it goes. And I was like, they were, great people. I was like, sure, I'll do anything I can do to help. So they bring this dog. They're holding it. The dog has a diaper on because it no longer has bowel control. Can't move its back legs, completely paralyzed in the back. And is basically, they said, hadn't ate for misalignment, right? And adjusted it just like I would anybody else. The next day, they bring the dog back in and say, can you please do whatever you did yesterday, right? And so I was like, they said, we got home, the dog started eating, started drinking, I saw him move his back legs, just do whatever you did then. So did whatever I did the day before. They went home. In the next few days, they kept bringing the dog in to get adjusted. No longer had diaper, complete movement of the legs were back. That family just moved to Lubbock, and they took the dog with them, and the dog just plays in the backyard like he's a normal functioning little dog, right? And so we see this now. We have, y'all coming in if you want. You have a seat.
Sorry, we're late.
That's okay. And so I started thinking, and these dogs that come in, you know, they've had tumors that have gotten better and all these things. But then I started thinking, you know what, they're the same kids. Kids we see are resilient. They get better really fast. They don't have a predisposition to what's going to work and what's not going to work, right? Half the people that come in the office have this what's it called, where you don't believe something, you're not sure you believe it. Yes, they have this skepticism about them, right? They're like, well, I'll try it and test it and see if it works, but I don't know if it's going to work. That right there is a mind block, right? So yes, it works because it's the law of gravity. If we remove pressure from your nerve, it's going to work better. But the mind is not helping. It's not there. And what I find is that kids and dogs have no block, right? They're just, it is what it is. And so all these things try to happen. So I always tell people, like, this power that we just went over, all of these cases, the placebos that we covered, of people who had this or had that and they no longer have it after they thought they got a pill or they thought they got a shot, that was that intelligence, that pure intelligence, actually changing the chemistry, the function of the body. And that intelligence is constantly flowing inside and out. And right now, even though we've been saying that these are miracles, that these placebo effects are miracles, right now your heart's beating and you don't have to make it beat. Right? When you sleep tonight, your lungs, you'll breathe without having to consciously think about it. The food that you ate at lunch, your body's digesting that right now, and then it's breaking down every single nutrient, and then it has to not only break down the nutrients, but then you have 70 trillion cells in your body. So that intelligence has to take each one of those nutrients to each one of those 70 trillion cells in a perfect, exactly amount that's a symphony, right, that has to be organized through this system. And so when you're getting adjusted, you know, I don't want you to just think of it as popping. I want you to actually visualize that every time you get adjusted, that power that's inside there to heal and to change and to reshape things in your body, it's every time you get adjusted, it's actually breaking through to those organ cells and tissues like a dam that was holding back water, and you got adjusted and that water was able to go through to every cell in your entire body. And then, you know what? You get good adjustments, good results with the adjustment already, but if you tie that in and actually see the things that are going on in your body when you get adjusted, I believe you'll start having even better results with the adjustment. Okay? So I always end this with a testimonial I want to share with you. It says, I really appreciate the approach to wellness that Pure Life Family Wellness uses. The printed information, bulletins, and seminars are thoughtful and interesting. Chiropractic service is first class and tailored to me as an individual, not just a routine run-through. This approach to wellness has always appealed to me more than medical emergency treatment, and interestingly kept me away from the need for what I call reactive medicine. I feel healthier and more productive with regular visits to Pure Life Family Wellness. Relief of leg, sciatic pain that has bothered me over the years, and since visiting Dr. Smith, I've not had any major pain in 1 year. Awesome. So I want to thank you for being here again for this. I hope you really got something out of it. And I want also for you to start experimenting with this type of thing, and let me know any results or changes that you have with that, all right? I also want to tell you that we're going to be putting these online, so you get access to these workshops that we do, and then even more information. And we've covered the areas of Pure Life, which I call this nerve flow, Pure Life, and we teach why this is so important for the brain to be able to be connected with the body and get pure life through those nerves. Pure food, where we talked about the carb cycle diet. We even talked about eating natural, healthy food from nature, right, that actually has all the nutrients that your body needs. Pure fitness, the reason why we do exercises, the most effective exercises. Pure energy was the last workshop that we did, and then this one is pure mind. So we want to just expand on these topics, and you'll all get access to that Pure Life University once we get it done. All right? So thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep.